Imagine a night of celebrating the 4th of July turning into a bloody nightmare when a killer entity emerges to hunt down the revelers. This is the story of the Night of Independence, where the joy of the festival becomes unimaginable terror. Hit play and get ready for fear. It was a perfect summer night on the 4th of July. The city of Maplewood was in full celebration mode, honoring Independence Day with parades, shows, and of course, the spectacular fireworks that would light up the sky at night. Entire families gathered in the Central Park, bringing food and drinks for a large community picnic. Children ran around with American flags in their hands, while adults enjoyed lively conversations. Amidst all this joy, Ethan and his friends were excited to enjoy the night. They gathered near the lake where a large bonfire was being prepared for the evening. The atmosphere was pure happiness and camaraderie, and no one could have imagined that this night of celebration would turn into a real nightmare. As night fell and the fireworks started bursting in the sky, a strange sense of unease began to spread among some of the attendees. Ethan noticed that the air felt colder and heavier, as if something invisible was hovering over them. He mentioned the feeling to his friends, but they laughed and said it was just the excitement of the moment. Suddenly, a mysterious blackout covered the park, plunging everything into total darkness. The streetlights went out, and only the light from the fireworks in the sky provided some visibility. The laughter and conversation stopped, replaced by worried murmurs and confused looks. That's when Ethan saw it for the first time. In the middle of the darkness, a tall, shadowy figure began to move among the people. It had a spectral appearance, with eyes glowing a deep red. Wherever the figure passed, people started screaming and running, but no one could escape. Ethan and his friends watched in horror as the killer entity began attacking the revelers, one by one. With each scream of terror, the entity seemed to grow stronger, moving with supernatural speed. Ethan knew they needed to get out of there, but the panicked crowd made any attempt to escape difficult. While trying to escape, Ethan and his friends got separated in the chaos. He saw the entity dragging one of his friends into the darkness, and the sight left him paralyzed with fear. Determined to survive, Ethan ran towards the woods, believing he could hide among the trees. But the entity seemed always one step ahead. Every time he thought he had found a safe place, the figure appeared, getting closer each time. Ethan heard the screams of other revelers echoing through the night, and the feeling of despair grew with every second. Ethan finally found a small wooden shelter in the middle of the woods. He locked himself inside, trying to control his breathing and the pounding of his heart. Outside, he could hear the heavy footsteps of the entity, getting closer. It was as if the entity could sense his fear, using it to track him down. Inside the shelter, Ethan found an old lantern and a box of matches. With trembling hands, he lit the lantern, illuminating the small space around him. That's when he realized he wasn't alone. The mutilated bodies of other revelers were piled in a corner, their faces frozen in expressions of terror. Ethan then understood that the killer entity wasn't just killing for the sake of it. There was a pattern, a dark ritual it was following. The bodies were arranged in a specific way, forming a symbol Ethan didn't recognize but felt was deeply evil. The door of the shelter began to creak, and Ethan knew the entity was about to find him. In a last act of desperation, he used the matches to set the shelter on fire, hoping the flames would deter the entity or at least alert others to the imminent danger. The entity burst into the burning shelter, its red eyes glowing with hatred. Ethan tried to fight but felt the creature's superhuman strength easily overpower him. However, the flames started to engulf the entity, which momentarily recoiled, giving Ethan a small chance to escape. Running through the forest, Ethan heard the screams of other survivors. The entity was distracted by the fire, but he knew it wouldn't last long. He needed to find help and warn the authorities about the horror unfolding in the park. Ethan managed to reach a road where he found a group of police officers responding to emergency calls. Desperate, he told his story, but realized it wouldn't be easy to convince anyone of what was really happening. The officers took him back to the park, where the shelter still burned. When they arrived, they found the charred remains of the shelter, but there was no sign of the entity. Authorities began investigating, but what they found were only inconclusive clues and conflicting testimonies. The entity seemed to have disappeared as mysteriously as it had appeared. Despite his attempt to warn others, Ethan knew the entity was still out there. The events of that night would haunt him forever, and he lived with the certainty that, somewhere, the entity awaited its next victim. Independence Day would never be the same for him, and for all who survived that terrible night. The events of the Night of Independence became an urban legend, a dark warning about the dangers that can hide in the happiest celebrations. And for Ethan, every 4th of July was a constant reminder of the horror he faced and the terror that could return at any moment. Want the second part of this story? Leave it in the comments. If you have a horror story and want to see it published on our channel, send us your story.